What I'm going to present is actually this is a paper that was already published in the Sociological Journal Theory and Society. So if you happen to have an interest in the paper, you can easily find it online. Just Google my last name. It's work with my colleague Eric Garland from the Norwegian Business School, and who was actually the reason why we embarked on this project. He used to be a black metal musician, and then he became a researcher. You know, after he had an album in the early 1990s. And in this paper, this is actually was the first of the three papers that we wrote on black metal. But in this paper, we were interested in the concept of authenticity and specifically the notion of escalation of the pursuit of authenticity in the context of Norwegian black metal. And authenticity this is a concept with a long history in sociology. We know that in modern societies, people seek authenticity. They place significant value on authenticity. But scholars have also identified the need to explore the dark side of authenticity. These are the tensions and the controversies surrounding this concept. So authenticity is generally manifested through the persistent effort to stay true to one's identity. But we also know that self-expressions that are viewed as authentic may irritate others. They may exercise pressure on actors to be inauthentic. Studies expect such tensions to be regulated through moderation, through compromise. But this contradicts empirical cases where discrepancies are not downplayed, but they're further augmented. And this is what we define as escalation in the pursuit of authenticity. The increasing difference between the private self, your self-understanding, and the public display of yourself. This is what we mean by escalation, and this is what we study in the context of Norwegian black metal. Why is escalation important to study? Well, the pursuit of authenticity naturally feeds into the emergence of countercultures and radical movements that define the dominant social order as oppressive or unrepresentative. The refusal to moderate the pursuit of authenticity by accommodating social conventions is conducive to social conflict, auto-categorical schism. A good example of categorical schism is the Protestant schism in the Catholic Church in the 16th century. Escalation is also important because it adds a layer of complexity to social evaluation. The pursuit of self-realization in defiance of social conventions and public roles may be perceived as repudiation of compromise and moderation as selling out and pandering. And of course, this is something that is very tangible in the context of black metal. So I guess this is really not the place to discuss the nature of black metal because this is such a knowledgeable audience. But very quickly, the black metal, it's an outgrowth of the established heavy metal genre, features by now tens of thousands of bands. It was initially a marginal subculture that became the largest cultural export of Norway, as a matter of fact. Very quickly, the origins of black metal originated with Led Zeppelin and Black Sabbath, whose album is the earliest manifestation of the desire to explore the mythical and occult, to push the boundaries of rock music with lyrics that evoke excess and transgression. The first wave of black metal bands was in the early 1980s, of course, with Venom, Bathory, Celtic Frost, Merciful Fate. The explicit pronouncements of blasphemy were an important precursor to the second wave of black metal that took place in Norway in the early 1990s, with, of course, Mayhem, Emperor, Darkthrone, Immortal, and others. So the second wave essentially escalates the first one. This is our angle. This is our perspective. This is what we're interested in: is how the second wave escalated the original first wave. The first wave of bands combined satanic references with theatrical styles of performance. For example, Kronos Venom says we came up with a serious band with serious titles, but at the end of the day, we're human beings, we're entertainers. A crucial difference in identity construction between the first and second wave bands is that
I'm so sorry, I will solve it. I would ask participants to mute. Thank you. Thank you. So go ahead, Stoyan, sorry.
Okay, we good? Okay, shall I continue?
Yes, you can continue, yeah.
Okay,
right.
Good. So the Norwegian bands aspired towards a form of music that was genuinely evil rather than being contrived only for the purposes of performance. So the bands attempted to make metal real, again by removing the mundane and theatricality of the first wave of black metal, rejecting the compromise that earlier bands had concluded with the music industry. So they aspired towards a world very dark, depressive, puritanical, and intolerant. This is a sentence that we took from a fantasy of black metal. This is how black metal evolved from death metal, just kind of aesthetically. Just to mention very quickly what we did actually, we used primary and secondary data sources. These include 66 interviews with Norwegian band members and fanzines from 88 to 97. News press articles, the text of the court sentences related to black metal, secondary sources in English and Norwegian, and the study proceeded in back and forth movement between theory and data. So in the paper, we document two forms of escalation and two moderated mechanisms of escalation. Okay, so I'll just sketch them. For those of you that are interested, want to know more about this and how we substantiated these mechanisms in force, you're more than welcome to look at the paper online. So first of all, escalation is innovation. Black metal developed as a reaction against the commercialization of death metal. It deviated from it both stylistically and ideologically, with sonic presence that was characterized by stripped down song structures and arrangements, fast tempos and mid-range drone. Black metal was intentionally cacophonous, a product of aversion to melody, a taste for extreme distortion reflected in a fast guitar technique, blast beat drumming, high-paced percussion through chainsaw guitars. The evolution of the new genre was driven by the desire to maximize difference by articulating evil content and by creating a special sound or riff, whereas special was explicitly understood as brutal, extreme, and intense. Of course, this comes from the fanzines, from our analysis of the data. The second form of escalation that we document in the paper is escalation as transgression. Words began to be replaced by actions in late 1901. Brutality and violence were no longer confined to music, but they spilled over into real life. The key figures in black metal sought to prove the seriousness of the music by undertaking criminal acts. This resulted in arson attacks on about 30 of Norway's historic wooden churches. 15 black metal scene members were arrested for crimes, including arson, grave desecration, burglary, assault, rape, and murder. We found frequent references to extremity and brutality in statements and designation of the capacity to kill as a measure of authenticity, signifying the ultimate form of renouncement of normal behavior. So violence was viewed as a confirmation of belonging and a rejection of the oppressive normality of Norwegian society. So once again, this comes from the qualitative, from the analysis of the fanzine data. So these data, the fanzines, the text that we accessed they enabled us to identify two moderating mechanisms in escalation. The first one, so we wanted to look at escalation as a process, okay? And that's probably something that is a little bit unusual in the paper. You know, we wanted to have a more dynamic view of black metal. Statements extolling brutality had to be backed up by actions lest they be rendered insincere, thereby encouraging a dynamic of one-upmanship that proved difficult to stop in a small, isolated community. So escalation was driven less by an ideological stance. I mean, less by preoccupation with ideas, you know, such as Satanism or paganism, than by an endogenous social mechanism whereby statements served as pledges in a process of competition, and whereby each actor strived to be more transgressive than the other. This is very well illustrated by the works of Matisse, former member of Emperor. We would take out our lyrics and try to lift them as much as possible, which didn't end well. Once you got into the whole downward spiral of being crazy and extreme, it was bound to dissolve. It was like a cult. One person would spur everyone on, and it became this loud, screeching feedback effect where it was bound to end in sadness. So the two mechanisms that I mentioned, the first one is social exclusion, and the second one is self-selection. Social exclusion is a very straightforward mechanism. It was implemented, it basically was the pressure exercised by core members of the scene who threatened and applied exclusion to control boundaries and maintain distance from the overground, from the mainstream. So core members of the black metal scene acted as musical and morality police, defining the codes of the scene, such as clothing, which bands are good, which ones to avoid, how to act, whom to interact with, and whom to avoid, differentiating true members from what they call the posers. And this is something that comes up recurrently in the texts of the Damascus, the importance of differentiating between the true members and the posers. So, for example, this is a statement by candidates of dark tone. To isolate is what we must do to make black metal pure, stay dark and cold. Or Euronymous in 1991, normal idiots should stay the hell away from this record, don't buy it. Okay? So the second mechanism is self-selection. Scene members self-selected into forms of behavior that were associated with conformity or escalation, resulting in the self-exclusion of dissenters, those with lower level of tolerance for violence and extremity, and increasing interest in black metal was perceived as a threat to the authenticity of the underground scene, which could potentially be staved off by way of extremity, ensuring that only the truly committed stay. This use of extremity is rational in nature, serving the ends of purification, of escalation of authenticity through self-selection. And a very good example of this are the words of a former member of the section. When you go deeper into it, some people realize that this has gone way too far. And that's where the roads go different ways. Some people are prepared to step into the unknown and explore the dark for real. So that's a very good illustration of this mechanism of bifurcation, of self-selection. You know, some people decided to go this way, and other people decided to go another way. And as a matter of fact, this is what happened with my co-author, Eric, who was a member of the early Norwegian black metal scene, but then he realized that things had developed in a direction that he wasn't comfortable with. He essentially left the scene, and he was employed in the advertising industry, and that's actually what happened with a lot of people that they decided to go in a different direction. Okay, so the moral panic in Norwegian society led to stigmatization of the genre that is still felt nowadays. Families compelled boys to stop playing or listening to black metal. Members of bands were subjected to physical violence or social pressure. But the flip side was even more remarkable. The media coverage of the crimes put black metal on the map, giving it a momentum that is yet to fade. So the genre went from tens or hundreds of records sold early on in 93, 94 to essentially a global phenomenon. Already by 2003, Dimmu Borgir sold over 1 million copies of their albums. Okay, so within a decade, the genre essentially commercialized. So what makes the popularity of black metal sociologically interesting is the suggestion that it happened not despite the stigmatization of the genre, but because of the stigmatization of the genre, as the negative public image served to confirm the authenticity of a genre whose endorsement of normative violations matched its actions. We know that controversy can extend the life of ephemeral musical moments, but Norwegian black metal testifies that evidence of real acts of transgression can be even more powerful in ensuring longevity. So the social evaluation of transgression as authentically living out the content of the music was critical in the meaning attributed to the black metal genre, the enduring interest in it, and its commercialization over time. So what are the conclusions? We highlighted two forms of escalation, innovation and transgression, and two mediating mechanisms. We identified the positive aspects of escalation as the relentless pursuit of a distinctive sound and artistic style in defiance of the music industry. However, the transgression content increasingly spilled over into real life, motivating away criminal activities that came to stigmatize black metal in Norwegian society. This wave was constituted by the aggregation of small steps away from normality, starting with core members and diffusing through competition and imitation to more peripheral members of the black metal scene. A process of purification through the exclusion and self-selection of members with lower tolerance for extremity eventually resulted in the reinforcement of a more brutal oppositional stance. And finally, practical implications. The black metal case is not anomalous. It's increasingly relevant in explaining how unpopular norms can gain wider acceptance through their aspiration for authenticity. And it adds to the mounting evidence that constructive theatricality can be outperformed by a strategy of escalation. Or in other words, that burning the bridges can be more effective than building bridges. And we think that sociologically speaking, this is one of the most interesting aspects and consequences of black metal. That burning the bridges can actually be a very effective strategy. And this has important implications as well for the growing spread of political populism. Okay, so thank you very much. This is my co-author Eric, whom I mentioned. And as you can see, we're in the basement of Helvete, a very memorable visit. So thank you so much for your attention. And once again, if you're interested in paper or anything that was discussed here, please don't hesitate to have a look at the paper online. There are two other papers on black metal, sociological papers on black metal that we expect to be published within the next few months. The first one looks at the commercialization of the genre, and the second one is actually an analysis of the aesthetic aspects of black metal. We analyzed the covers of black metal albums. Thank you so much. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Stoyan.